Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 55. We're joining you every week to talk IT career progression and bring you the advice we wish we'd been given earlier on in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
John, I am doing great. Extremely caffeinated as usual. We are both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Great, Nick. We're making choices as usual, per usual, as one of my coworkers used to say.
Yeah, we definitely are.
And we are not both VMware pre-sales engineers. As we're sitting here today recording, I just passed my last day at VMware, so I am unemployed. But never fear, I think I have another gig lined up. So don't cry for me, Argentina.
That's good. We won't feel too bad for you. Aren't you just like moving yourself to the cloud or something like that?
I'm looking for new synergies and partnership and other buzzwords.
Right. You have to do what you have to do.
All right. So today's topic is part 3 of preparing for unexpected career opportunities. Part 1, we talked about, the different types of opportunities that could be out there, why you need to be ready and what you should be doing to get ready. So if you're looking for that kind of content, go back and listen to part 1. Part 2, we kind of talked about the different ways that those things present. We talked about initial contact from, unsolicited sources. We talked about, if you just voluntarily decide that things have, turned around at your current position, you need to look elsewhere. And then we talked about the involuntary case where you are just terminated and you are out there all of a sudden looking. So that's kind of where we left off, right? When we're kind of sitting in a position where we are either being contacted by recruiters and we've made a decision to respond to an unsolicited proposal, or we are deciding to make that initial contact, maybe go back and call recruiters that reached out to us before and we let down easily, or if we are out there all of a sudden needing to find a new position. I think that's where we left off, right?
Absolutely. We talked about possible ways you could respond and say no thank you, but this is, I actually want to have a conversation with someone. It interests me enough.
Right. Okay. So let's get into that. How should we kick that off?
So if we think about, the unsolicited and voluntary cases, John, you should think about what would it take to get you to make a change or think outside your current role. What are some ideas you might have in that spectrum?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that I talked about last time a recruiter reached out to me and said, or maybe I didn't talk about it, don't remember anymore. I had a recruiter reach out to me and say, hey, I noticed that you're not really thinking about looking for a new position, but what would it take for you to actually make a move? Do you have any ideas about that? And I thought that was, a very powerful tactic to use because it's very difficult for someone to say that without you actually thinking about that. But I mean, outside of that specific situation, you should maybe know the answer to that anyway. So you should maybe revisit that issue every month or every few months, every quarter maybe. What is it that I really like about the job that I'm in? What are the things that I feel like I'm lacking? And what would be the kind of new dream scenario that would need to present itself? Significant improvements in, areas A, B, and C in order for me to think about considering a new position. Some of these things are, I would say, personal values. Like maybe you have a set of value statements about, your ethics that, the current position isn't currently meeting, or maybe there are things like compensation that you're not that happy with. Maybe there's things like travel that you are doing too much of or not enough of. Perhaps you're just in an industry. I think we talked about that you're not happy with, and you'd like to make a change in industry. Maybe there's just a different role out there that you've been finding interesting that you could go for and learn more about and learn about through that interview process. So a bunch of different things out there. Maybe even a series of companies. There's a specific company.
Right. And this goes back to the, you said dream scenario, but we know from episode 19 that we should dream in bands, right? That's something you actually coined the phrase for, so I'm throwing it back in your face. But, make sure that you've thought about, hey, is this within the band of possibility or a band of things that I want to, learn more about, just like you said.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, John, if I'm set on having this conversation with someone that I've reached out to or has reached out to me kind of in an unexpected scenario, what questions do I need to ask in this first conversation, you think?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that we've talked a little bit before about how you should be in initial screening calls, but let's review it a little bit. I think like a really important thing is to find out exactly what their hiring process looks like. So they've reached out to you, they've talked about a position or a spectrum of possibilities of positions that you find interesting. So you're reaching out to them, they're reaching out to you. Let's figure out exactly what that hiring process looks like. Typically, there's going to be a screening call where they, kind of go over your resume with you and say, tell me about this position, tell me about this position. And if you're prepared for that, then you need to make the positions that you've done relevant to the position or positions that you're interviewing for. Right. So you need to do some work there before you have that initial screening call. And you need to make sure that your LinkedIn profile reflects that. And maybe you make some tweaks there to show that, hey, this job that I've done, had some parts to it that are extremely relevant and congruent with this position that you're considering me for. So that's part one. I would say, you should probably in that process dive into and flesh out exactly what the position is, what things that they're looking for in an ideal candidate, right? So, again, somebody asked me like, well, what 3 things would it take for you to move? And, you could say something like that to the recruiter. Well, what 3 things do you think the hiring manager or your organization is looking for in an ideal candidate? You're out there hunting for somebody. What is it that you're hunting for? There's got to be a list of requirements or skills or backgrounds that you find ideal and that, I want to know about before, we get too deep into this so that I can either match what I'm doing to that ideal, profile or tell you why, some of the things that I've done might be a closer match to that ideal profile than appears to be on the surface. So that's kind of what I'm thinking there. And then I think finally, maybe the timeline, right? So they're out there looking for people. What is the timeline that they're thinking of? Like, are they desperate to fill this position? Or, is this, they're calling you, because it's the last resort? If you're initially reaching out to them, where are they in that process? Have they already, screened 50 other people and presented some to the hiring manager? Are you late or early in the process? And if you're late, then how late are you? If you're early, how early are you? Are you going to be one of the first people and they have a, 4-week process of filtering people and presenting them to the hiring manager? If so, then you kind of need to know that, to set your expectations. One of the things that I would say is, unfortunately, recruiters might not be that honest with you about that, right? They tend to have this attitude of, I want to cast the widest net possible, have as many potential candidates, ready to present as possible, and keep those people available as fallback options. So they might say, hey, we're, this meeting with the hiring manager got delayed, so I haven't been able to present to you yet, or whatever. When really what has happened is that you're in the second group of three or the third group of three, and the hiring manager needs to rule, three or four people out before you're even, seen by him or her. So just set your expectations correctly, and take what they say with a grain of salt, right? About timelines. And I'm not, casting aspersions on, any specific recruiters. I'm just saying this is what I've experienced, and what has, what I've observed happen in the past. So just something to keep in mind.
Well, hopefully, no matter what, even if you do have to wait a little bit, hopefully the recruiter is communicating well and in a timely manner of what you can expect next. If they're not doing a good job of that, then you may not necessarily want to work with this person in the future ever.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this recruiter is, at the current time in this process, the only representative of the company or the organization that you're talking to. And that might not be a fair representation of that organization. It's the only one that you have. And, I don't know what else to say about that, right? Like you can't, it's difficult to hold an entire organization responsible for the behavior of one person. So, I mean, your goal is to get past this gatekeeper to the hiring manager and have that discussion with the hiring manager or whatever the next steps are, right? So, the person that I would say that you need to start holding responsible for the, how you're going to be treated in the organization is when you do have that discussion with the hiring manager. So if they say that they're going to call you back in 48 hours and they don't, and then you reach out to them and then you don't hear back for an additional 48 hours, and then you reach out again and then they call you back 24 hours after that, you have no reason to believe that that's not how they would treat you if you get hired and you're on that person's team. So that's where you start holding, that person responsible, because they're acting the way that they would act with an employee. You're a potential employee. So either they don't care about, how they're acting, or, they just are bad at communication, and that's what you're going to have to face. But that's not where we are in the process, right? We're not
Right.
We're not there describing that yet.
I kind of, you can tell me if you think this is baloney, but I kind of equate this part of the process as like, the recruiter, it's almost like they're a real estate agent trying to get you to move into a new house that they're supposed to be selling for someone else. And they can tell you about it, and they want to set you up with a showing so you can go and look around the house and see for yourself. Maybe you can even look at pictures on the website, but you haven't stepped in it to really imagine yourself being there, living there, that kind of thing. But they're playing the psychological trick to, well, if you were to move houses, what would you want it to be like? And that's just what came to my mind.
Yeah, I think you have to keep in mind, what the recruiter's job is, right? The recruiter's job is to make a placement, right? So you're part of a portfolio of people that they're going to be presenting to somebody else, whoever is making the next decision. And their job is to get as many qualified candidates into that funnel for the next step of screening, right? So you have to think of yourself that way, and you have to be very, very realistic about that and say, this person, whatever it is that they're saying to me, they are, a salesperson, and I represent a product to them, right? I'm not somebody that they're representing to the company. I am the product that they are trying to sell to the company, and I'm in a spectrum of possibilities of potential product that is being sold to the company, right? They're only going to hire one of us, or maybe they're looking to hire two or three people even. But the idea that you are being represented, by this person is not true, right?
Right.
You're not paying them, so you're not being represented by them.
Okay. So let's say you had the conversation with the recruiter and it sounds interesting. They're going to put you forward in the process. Why do I keep going if I'm still not really looking for a new job?
Okay, yeah. So that's a really good point. I think I probably, when I was working at VMware, took, 2 or 3 interviews over the years, for various reasons, right? One was to just keep in practice with interviewing, right? In my job, I was not, routinely going out and acquiring new customers. So I wasn't selling myself and the organization that I represented, and over to a new customer to try to get them to buy VMware product for the very first time. So one of the things that I wanted to keep my hand in was representing myself and selling myself to a prospective buyer, like the prospective buyer just happening to be purchasing or representing talent, and me as an employee, and not VMware as a product. So I kind of looked at it as keeping my hand in that way, because it's not something that I do as a regular part of my job. I also think that it's just important to practice interviewing, right? You're going to be asked questions over and over again, and you have to have answers for these questions. Like, there's not that many of them, and if you see them, before that critical interview for that job that you just absolutely desperately want, you know, you aren't going to see the patterns of those questions. Tell me about a time where you had a conflict with a customer and you needed to resolve it. That's a question that comes up all the time. Tell me about a time that you had a conflict with a
That's
coworker.
not a question, John.
Well, but it's a situational discussion that they're going to ask you to answer, right? Tell me about a time, dot dot dot. And inevitably, it's not. Tell me about a time where you were extremely triumphant and you had to just hold down your ego and not lord how amazing you were over everybody else. It's always, tell me about a time when there was a conflict, or you had to break a tie, or somebody's idea that you disagreed with was the way that you had to go forward. Tell me about how you handled that situation. Those are the kinds of questions, behavioral questions, that you're going to have to answer, and you need to have specific situations that you can cite, about your behavior, and describe how it is that you as an individual act in those situations. And they should be real ones, right? They shouldn't be, too perfect, right? It's like, it was really difficult for me to not, keep on saying, I told you so, and hey, I think we're doing the wrong thing. I had to pitch in and be a good teammate, because the decision was made, even if I didn't agree with the situation or the decision. It's like that kind of thing. And that has to be real, right? Otherwise, you're going to get the job based on like that behavior. And if that's not actually a behavior that you can exhibit, then you're going to be miserable, right? So you have to be, have good answers that are true. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So it's that practice. Yeah. So I think I talked about this last time, but another situation was one where I just didn't understand why they were calling me. Right. So I think we talked about this. It was situations where they were looking for managers or directors, leaders of people who had experience being managers before, and everything on my LinkedIn had me as an individual contributor. So I was just trying to understand, why were they calling me? It was in a related enough field. I wasn't really interested in what they were talking about. I didn't really understand the business. They didn't say the name of the business, and they were speaking in very general terms about what they were doing. But it was pre-sales technical, or customer success, or technical marketing, something along those lines. That I was like, well, maybe I can do that. Maybe that would be interesting. But I don't know why you're calling me to be a director with like 4 managers underneath me, each of whom was going to have 6 individual contributors. I don't have any experience doing that. But maybe you see something on my resume that's either misinforming you and I need to fix, or there's something on my resume that that does point to me being like, yeah, maybe I should be a director. Maybe I should skip over the position of actually like managing people and just start managing managers right away. But I needed to understand, and so that was an interesting process to evaluate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we said before, when you own your own school of mentoring, I think that gives you a lot of marketable qualifications, John. If you want to be part of that mentoring school and bask in the wide curricula that is available, send that tweet out to @NerdJourney for pricing and packaging today. Whether you have an unexpected opportunity on the horizon or not, anytime's a good time to join the John White School of Mentoring.
Have you ever figured out that pricing?
Yeah, that's confidential, John. That's proprietary.
Oh,
We're gonna have to
proprietary
talk about
information.
that. We're
Okay.
gonna have to table that and talk about it offline.
Okay.
But here's one for you.
Mhm.
Have you ever gone down this trail and tried to leverage a potential offer from something like this to get a raise at your current company? Is that something people should do?
I mean, I have a philosophical position about that, which is that you should not do that. Um, I mean, first of all, if you do that, you have to be prepared to take the offer, right? If you go down the road and get the offer and then go to your current manager and say, "Hey, I have this offer. Can you match it?" And they say, "No." Now what do you do? Do you say, "Okay, well, I'm not going to leave anyway. I'm going to just stay in my job"? They already know that you gone through the entire process to get an official offer from somebody else. They're starting to think, "Okay, you are on your way out. I need to start backfilling you. I need to start doing interviews." Like, you've just made a major signal that you are thinking about leaving, right? So that's a really bad position to be in. Like, you have to be prepared to take that offer. So if you're going to do that, again, I recommend that you don't, because, I mean, what if they say, "Yeah, we'll absolutely match it"? Okay, now you've still demonstrated that you're willing to go completely outside your organization, go all the way to the point of getting an official offer from a different company. So you're still positioning yourself as having looked outside and been going elsewhere, right? So they still might start to think about, okay, I can pay this much for 6 months as I try to backfill this person. So I just, it's extremely risky. I don't think it's a good idea at all. Now, I will say this: I have read about some organizations where their culture is they're not going to give you a major raise unless you demonstrate that some other company is taking that great of an interest in you. So they'll say specifically, "Hey, if you need a raise above X%, go get an offer. Like, demonstrate that you're worthy of that, or some other equivalent industry or equivalent competitor of ours thinks that you're worth that much money, and then we'll match it." And I would say that is an unhealthy organization to work for. So maybe you want to think about not working there just because of that specific behavior that they're telling you to exhibit.
Yeah, and this could, it sounds like you're saying that this could potentially be a brand damaging exercise. You could be looked at in a totally different light just because you went and did that. And everything that you stood for as a loyal employee up to that point is now somewhat tainted.
I think that's exactly what I'm saying. That's a very, very good summary. If you feel like you need more money, and compensation is an issue for you, then you should be bringing that up in your one-on-ones with your manager and saying, "Hey, I feel like I'm worth more money than I'm making. I'm doing more than I'm being asked of, and it is in my job description. I think I'm worth X% higher. What is it that we need to do together for you to be able to justify that kind of raise for me?" Right? And then make that a month-long collaboration between the two of you, so that your manager can go to bat for you and say, "Hey, you know, Nick, it's embarrassing that I'm not giving Nick more than this, because this is what Nick has done. He's done all these measurable things, and had this impact. We've been collaborating for 9 months on this, and it's been part of his plan. I'm just going to go say, hey, he needs this, and the other people on my team who haven't been talking to me about it, maybe it's just not important to them. So, I mean, that's, I think, the way to go, not talk to a separate company. Now, if you have a problem talking to your manager about that, or your manager doesn't want to have that conversation or won't have that conversation and won't work with you, then again, maybe that's a signal that you're not in an organization that has a healthy culture, right? And
Right.
that's a signal that you do need to go outside the company to get just a better culture. Maybe it's just that specific manager and you need to move to a different team. That's unfortunate, especially if you're happy in almost every other way. But I think that you should be able to honestly say, hey, I need more compensation. It's a separate conversation than a job performance conversation. And then to say, hey, what is it that we need to do to make it an easy go to bat for me, during compensation review time.
Sure. And one of the things to point out here, John, is that this unexpected opportunity could potentially come from within the organization where you already work. So if you end up pursuing it, there is a chance that your current manager could find out what you're doing.
Yeah,
We talked about before, do I tell the boss this happened? If it's within my same company, at this point, if I'm potentially going to talk to the hiring manager, finding out about the process, should I tell my own boss that I'm doing it?
I would say that you certainly want to, if it's something that you're going to pursue seriously, there's a point that you should be alerting your current manager and saying, hey, I've been having this conversation. I didn't realize how serious it was until just now when I realized, oh, they're actually interviewing me for this position. I thought it was just kind of idle chit chat, or whatever, and give them a heads up and, express how serious you are about it. You just don't want them to hear about it through the grapevine. And, it's kind of a judgment call on where in the process you need to be. If that's an area of concern for you, like that you'll be retaliated against or you suspect or whatever, and that's one of the reasons why you're exploring opportunities outside of your current team, then maybe you need to alert the person that you're talking to. You're saying, hey, I'm willing to talk to you about it, but this just cannot get back to my manager until the last possible minute, per company policy that we need to talk to my manager. And that's maybe one of the reasons why I'm exploring this. And if they don't understand that, then it's probably not the right position to be
Right. There's
discussing.
your red flag.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Now, what about this involuntary case, John? The involuntary separation. There are a lot of problems there. If I'm currently unemployed and this unexpected opportunity has come my way, it seems like there's a lot of pressure for me to reach out and grab it because I need a job.
Yeah, that is the problem with an involuntary separation, otherwise known as being fired or downsized or rift, reduction in force. If you're in that situation, it's suboptimal, right? It's not the ideal situation to be in. The ideal situation to be in is happy with the job that you have and then looking for something else because you're idly curious or actually quite curious, but there's no pressure on you to look for or take something. All the pressure is on you, especially if you have financial pressures, right? So that's why we talked about being financially ready all the time. Of grabbing things and accepting less money and accepting positions that are less than ideal. So, in this case where you've been terminated or you just unexpectedly find yourself in need of a different job, I think it's very, very important that you do all the preparation that we talked about in part one. And unfortunately, we don't have a time machine, for you to do that. So if you find yourself in this situation and you haven't been prepared, then you just need to do things in order, right? You need to get that resume in order, good enough, not probably not perfect. And then, figure out what kinds of positions you would be interested in doing, and then reaching out to the people, your network, and then the types of companies that you would like to work for, and apply for those positions, whether or not they're listed. Right. So, I think, again, the problem is in that specific situation, the pressure. So the amount of pressure you feel is directly proportional to the amount of preparation that you've done. Right. So the most pressure is, you don't have a financial cushion, and you haven't kept your resume up to date, and you don't have a fresh network, and, you're miserable. That's the worst situation to be in. We don't have like a magic wand for you there, right? You just have to work things in order. Fine. Whatever you need to do to get that resume in shape, whatever you need to do to start building a network, whatever you need to do to figure out the kind of position you're looking for, do those things, and you have to know yourself, right? You have to know what it is that you'd be happy with. I spend quite a bit of time on Reddit in the career advice subreddit. Not so much answering questions, because there's some people that are giving really good answers there, before I even read the question. But there's quite a few people there that say, what should I be doing with my life? I got this degree, I made a horrible mistake, I'm not interested in it, and now I'm in a dead end job. What should I be doing? That's a very, very difficult situation to find yourself in, and be able to be, coached through. So do everything that you can to know what it is that you're interested in, the types of things you'd be interested in doing, where your passion lies, and in the technology industry, generally we're people that we're really interested in learning things, really interested in, the different aspects of things, the industry is constantly changing. So we're used to, the ground shifting underneath us, no matter how uncomfortable that might actually be. But, yeah, find something that you're interested in. That's how I found my way to VMware. Of all the technologies that I represented, in small business IT, VMware was the one that was most interesting, and I set my sights to get a job in that industry, working for that company or for a partner. And it took me a few years to do it, but once I knew what I was interested in, I had a goal to work towards. So again, we don't have magic wands, but that's what you should be doing.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we're not judging anyone who has to take a job because they need it to get money so that they can survive. That definitely does happen. And
Absolutely.
if it happens to you, you can still execute on the things we've talked about to get the next role.
Yeah, that's it. Like sometimes you just need a job that is, not a great match, and it's not what you're passionate about, just because you need to, pay the rent. Kids got to eat, right? Like all those things. So, do that thing, and then figure out your passion, and figure out how to get to your passion, while you're doing the thing that, you're doing just for money. That's
Right.
totally fair, right? Just make sure that you're making progress on that, right? Have checkpoints, do
hmm
things, work your plan, create a plan and work your plan.
Speaking of making progress, John, as you're making progress down this path and you have these conversations, you're going to be in some interviews.
Yeah.
Do we have any interview tips that you can think of that we might like to add here?
Yeah. I think maybe let's refer to the different episodes that we've done. Well, the one thing that I'll say that I've heard very recently that I don't think we've talked about at all, it was on our, constant go-to manager tools. They did something, I think, last month about recruiters calling you and saying, "Hey, I know you just had this like next step interview. Call me and we can talk about it." And they advocated being ready to talk to the recruiter after each interview, and having like one or two positive things about each conversation. Oh yeah, they asked me about this, and I found that really interesting. I said this, and it really sparked this, interesting train of thought in my mind. What you're trying to do is demonstrate, how interested in the job that you are to the recruiter at each step, right? So if you are interested and you want to pursue it, then make sure that the recruiter in that phone call, that follow-up call, understands that you are interested, and talk and have like some real concrete things about why you're interested and what piqued your interest at each step. It's something that I hadn't really thought about before, but maybe is obvious in retrospect. They're calling really to follow up, to gauge your interest after each step, to know how interested you are.
Now, here's a question. If the recruiter is not doing that after each conversation you're having, but they're just telling you about the next one, is that a bad sign, you think? Or is that just they haven't been trained to do this?
I think that just means they haven't been trained to do it, because I think
Okay.
it's pretty standard, especially when they're trying to figure out who's interested and not interested at each step, to like maybe down select some people who like went through the process and went, I didn't really like that person that I interviewed with, or they talked about the position and it's not really what I'm interested in doing. So, they're the person who calls for follow-ups each time is looking for people to eliminate because they're not interested, or they just didn't meet the standard at each step, right? So it's a little bit easier to go to somebody and say, are you still interested? And take away all the people who aren't really that interested, rather than going to someone saying, hey, now, like, I need you to do an evaluation on every single person. And then, come to find out that like half those people aren't interested in moving forward with the process anyway. So it's a way to cut down on the work for the evaluators. Again, all from manager tools. It's not something that I personally have experience with. But, I definitely have been in that situation where I've done an interview and then the recruiter wants, my feedback right away. I didn't realize it was a pattern until I listened to that episode. And we'll put a link to the show notes there about that. So, just yet another piece of information to know about that interview process, as you move forward with it. As far as our previous episodes that we've talked about interviewing, as early as episode 2, screening and early hiring manager interviews, I think we call that one. Episode number 9, blowing an interview and how to dress for an interview.
Before we go on, episode 9, one of the best, like, I love the banter between John and me about dressing for an interview. That's just great. Go back and listen to it if you haven't. If you've listened to it already, go listen to it again, because it cracks me up every time.
Are you trying to trigger me?
No, I'm fine.
Yeah, no.
Take your PTSD and just park it and keep going.
Okay. I won't go on my rant about culture filters.
No, don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay. Episode 11, questions to ask in an interview. Number 15, on interview myths. Number 17, reasons to not pursue an opportunity. I think we revisited some of those today. Number 27, with Ramsey Marjabah of We the Sales Engineers. He talked about some of his interview experiences. And some of our other interviewers, the people that we talked to over the various episodes, had little nuggets there too. Episode 34, Jimmy Tassin talked about his interview process. I think he had was it Jimmy who had like a positive experience with somebody who wasn't going to hire him, but coached him?
That was Kieran.
Oh, it was Kieran. Okay, so that was in episode 46.
Yeah, he got the interesting feedback from the CEO. He wasn't well-rounded enough, and that was something that Kieran was able to take and do something about and make himself better.
Too focused, I think, right, was something that he said. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was episode 46. And then in episode 49, Marissa Eckberg talked about how to do research on a company during that interview process, that I thought was, really fascinating. So
yeah, and some nice negotiation tips too.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I think that we've been going a little bit longer than we planned. Believe it or not, we're going to have to go to a part 4. So anything else pop in your mind before we break here?
No, sir. To be continued. Just a reminder, we want people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you may be listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter at Nerd Journey.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. Maybe I'll even have a job by the next episode. We can all cross our fingers, right?
Maybe.
I'm John White at VJourneyman for Nick Cordy at Network Nerd _ signing off.
Adios. I'm doing well, John. As usual, extremely caffeinated. Just to let the listeners know, we are both pre-sales technical engineers with backgrounds in IT operations. We hope our career discussions will be You're a jerk. You are a jerk.
Sorry.
My wife came in here and she made me laugh. She's dancing around and doing all kinds of stuff. So like, stop it.
I'm going.
I tried really hard not to react to that, but it didn't work.
Too funny.
All right. Where should I start?
Doing great.
Just read the words. Is that what you're saying? All right. Here we go. I can be cool. I'm cool. Yeah. I got this. All right. 3, 2, 1. John, I am doing great. Extremely caffeinated as usual. We are both VMware. No, we're not. We're not. We're not both that. What I'm trying to read doesn't even say that.
Sad face. Sad face emoji.
Oh, this is going to go on the bloopers episode.
Yeah.
All right. Let's third time to charm.
Yeah.
This is a great stinger. 3, 2, 1.
I'm John White at VJourneyman for Nick Cordy at Network Nerd _ signing off.
Adios. Mute button problems.